for the second session here of our T-20 session of SOHO routers. We just mentioned briefly that wireless access points are usually having internal routers also. And we mentioned in reference to the power over Ethernet, which is the feature that allows wireless access point to have power and network through one single Ethernet cable. Was there any questions or doubts on this slide? Okay, next slide. So, as I stated before, SOHO is small office or home office routers, multi-function router, basically has router switch, DHCP server, has wireless access points, has a firewall, all integrated, all in one. As we saw a minute ago, you saw that that router that we can configure in the lab has many features in there. I only don't have to just configure, not only do I have the feature to be able to obviously configure the router itself, I can also configure the actual wireless access point. I can configure a firewall within it. I can even put security, MAC addresses, all that is in one. That's what these little small office, home office router does. Obviously, the more robust ones, the very costly ones, don't do all in one. Router's a router. Any questions? So, the steps installing a SOHO router itself. Basically, as we see here, we're going through our planning phase, physical installation of itself, and then lastly, we'll be going into the configuration of it. The basic channels, decide if it's that 1, 6, 11 that we said, if we're going into that 2.4 gigahertz, right? NAT, if we're doing any network address translations, any special unique IPs that need to be routed or ports that need to be routed internally into these SOHO routers, right? Because we said it's a small office, home office, so I might have a web server or something inside this office where I want to translate so that you can get to the right place. Obviously, the additional services that I just stated has the firewall to block unwanted traffic coming in or out. And it also has a quality of service to be able to manage the flow of network depending on the, if you specifically want the web server to have the most traffic coming in, or if you need it for streaming, you can actually choose what gets more priority than the other. Step part 2. Who can help me here with this one?
I can do it.
Thank you.
Steps to installing a SOHO router. Locate the router in a centered location where the wireless signal can cover the most office home space. Number 2, connect AC power to the device. Number 3, connect network cable if needed. Number 4, start up PC and connect to the router using a browser per manufacturer's instructions. Number 5, configure settings and update firmware if necessary.
Thank you. Pretty straightforward. In reference to the steps, there's not anything complex. And now, one key thing here, they said in reference to centralized location where wireless can go over the actual thing. Sometimes we don't have a choice. Sometimes the main distribution frame is already chosen for us. So we need to, because of the bell or of Comcast, whoever it is that's coming into this small office, that's where the location is. If we cannot extend the demarcation, which is where the line comes into the facility, then obviously we're going to have to create that room there. Always, always, IT is responsible for an extension of a demarc. Everyone understand what a demarc is?
Can you explain a little bit more?
Well, the demarc is usually the telco room, lack of at least the easy way of referring to it. It's basically where all of the connections that are coming in. Let's say if you're in the Dolphin Mall, right? There'll be a DMARC into the facility where all the teleco equipment comes. So all the phone companies or whoever it is, from that closet, from the DMARC, if you're on the other side of the mall, you are responsible, be you the owner of the facility, obviously in this case, because I'm not going to go and expect Adidas to be doing these things. I'm going to probably extend the DMARCs, but I am responsible. The guy that owns the building is responsible for extending the DMARC. That's usually for the public switch phone systems. And usually, since that is there, that is usually also where other providers come, like cable and all these places. They come where the DMARC is, which usually is the place where the public switch telephone networks have and connect their wiring for the customers on the premises itself. That makes sense?
Yes.
So you can see that technically, everyone has a DMARC in your house. Where does anybody have telephones still in their house? Let me rephrase that question.
Yes.
So there is one main line that comes into your house, and then all the other ones get extended to the other rooms. Did you ever notice that?
Right.
It's the same concept. That room, wherever that main line is, that is your DMARC. That's where it comes into the building. Anything else and is an extension of a DMARC.
Okay. All right. That's easy enough to understand.
Any other questions? All right. That's key, because whenever you're setting up in these small offices, or even in a professional environment, in the big offices, you need to know exactly where that is, because if it's not near the actual room and you order a new circuit, you need to make sure that there is wiring going that way. A lot of the times, you could actually pay the telco to have an extension box, another small little box, which is an extension of the actual demarcation. So basically, they'll bring either fiber coming up to this little room, or they'll bring up so many pairs of copper, so that all they have to do is just put a new card in your telco room. They'll put one downstairs to where they have, and then they'll put a card in your room, and they already have where they can actually cross connect the circuits. So all those things of how to install and where to install it, based off the wherever the telco or your ISP is leaving the connection. You need to be fully aware of that. Next, now that you know where you're going to place it, you need to ensure coverage. Here they're saying centralized, but if we have a location that is too far away and we need wireless coverage throughout the facility, then we need to be fully aware of where I need to put more access points. Any questions? Your SID, that's your service set identifier. Exactly what it means, SSID. Obviously, it's also called the network name. Like I said, mine's called do not enter. It defines the wireless network itself. The WAPs, or the wireless access points, usually are configured to broadcast this name. You can actually hide it, but that's actually security with obscurity. It's not real security. All you do is actually, it's not broadcasting, but if I ever did see it, or if I did realize what your name is, then I can still get in. It doesn't really do anything except for just hides the broadcast. It's still in the air. There is some sophisticated equipment that's able to listen to all these channels. Remember, we said it was radio channels, and you could actually see all the different broadcast channels and their actual coverage. Any questions? Next one. Jordan, can you help me out?
channels, or configuring a SOHO router, channels. Wireless routers can be set to use different channels. In the 2.4 gigahertz channel, channels are numbered 1 through 11. Channels 1, 6, and 11 are the commonly used in the United States to avoid interference, either from another network nearby or from devices also using that frequency. The channel change is made only on the router because each client should automatically detect and change the new channel. Most SOHO routers can automatically decide which channels to use depending on the channels from nearby networks.
Yeah, and that's what I told you guys, is that we have to be careful in reference to the channels, because if we use the exact same channels, we're going to create problems. So what they've added features into these new routers is that they basically go and they listen and say, all right, what are the channels? All right, this is a channel that is being used the least around here. All right, let me be this channel for right now. Usually it does that obviously in the initial boot of the equipment. It searches around and does that. We do not do that with wireless access point. We purposely select with a WAP, a device that's concentrated for wireless access point. We purposely actually choose the channels to avoid cross contaminations. Because remember, as I stated, the equipment, when it comes on, if we put it on automatic, if something happened to one of the other ones that was there and it didn't come up on time, some of these channels will get repeated in zones and create problems. Any questions? MAC filtering. This is another feature that is very, very useful. It's another security with obscurity. It's great. Basically, since MAC addresses have a 48-bit, I'm pretty sure you guys also saw inside, if you started playing with the actual GUI for a router, you could actually clone your MAC. So if you go into this router and you put in there an actual MAC address and say that MAC is allowed, and I actually was listening and I noticed what MAC address is available to be on that network, once again, I am in. You've done security by MAC filtering, no other security except for that, I am accepted. You asked me what was my name. I gave you the number associated to my name in that layer 2. That's my MAC address. And he goes, oh, come on in. Any questions? Next one. This is another great feature. You can see my sarcasm already piling up. Wi-Fi protection setup. This is the worst thing you could ever do to your life. Do not do this. If you thought it was a great thing, think again. It actually allows devices to join the network. I'm pretty sure you guys actually seen this. They're very similar to, let's say, when you're going to connect your Bluetooth, that it spits out a code and it asks you to put the code. Very similar. A lot of times also these little things, if you're close enough, it'll allow to join without even having to even give a key when you press that button. That's what WPS is. So you're already configured with your actual WPA or your WPA2 encryption, but you just made a horrible thing, because when it does that, it actually simplifies it by giving it the code without having to enter the code. A lot of people turn that feature off. Avoid somebody that's very lazy doing that. Just fair warning. Questions on WPAs and the great features that it has? I think you all fell asleep. Hello.
We're engaged.
DMZ. All right, your demilitarized zone. That's exactly what it means, demilitarized zone. That's an area where nobody should be going with weapons or payloads. So, I believe I kind of told you guys, and now you get to see my beautiful drawings as always. So you have your internet out here. The wild, wild west. That's what WW is. The wild, wild west. Not World Wide Web, right? Don't Some go quoting me. Wild Wild West for the story. Here we go. And you had that firewall, right? That I told you guys once about. Now, from here, you go into this DMZ. This is where usually all your web servers, anything that somebody needs to access from the internet is going to go through this firewall, is going to be inside this DMZ. Then I have my second firewall here that goes to my internal WAN, and then obviously all the sub LANs inside my company. So this DMZ has another firewall on this side. Must have, if you're gonna do it right, a firewall on both sides, just in case if you're compromised up to this, hopefully they don't get past this firewall. That's if you don't put the same exact password for the admin, God only knows. Any questions? We're comfortable with configuring a DMZ and what it is for? Okey-dokey. Next, the SOHO routers, as we stated, has DHCP, the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, which obviously keeps track. You can actually configure the exact range. You can actually change the actual IP range. As mine was in a 10 dot something, I can go in there and change the actual IP range that I want. Just because, for instance, maybe I have a VPN from one connection to the other, and I just want to make sure that we know what IPs are what inside our network. We want to try to keep a standard, especially if I have static ranges. Any questions? It has a NAT. Anyone knows what NAT means? Or remembers what I stated that NAT means?
Yeah.
Okay. And it is?
Oh, my bad. You want me to explain it? NAT is basically sharing one IP for basically everybody within that domain. That's what the router uses. So whatever the router is sending out, it's going to share that IP with everybody behind it.
Mm-hmm. As I stated, it's too expensive to have too many IPs just reserved for you as a company. So the router, what he does NAT translation. He has the public IP. He's the one with the public IP. So you want to go and touch out here, Google on port 80, right? So what he'll do, he'll use one of those ports that are not being used by any other application, and he assigns that number to you. 4555, just to give you a high number out there. And then now that he gives that to you, that's the one that he's going to replace here as his IP and his port. On his table, he already has that 45555 was whatever number that you gave him before, XYZ. Whatever number you were communicating on, he has your IP with port XYZ referring to that 4555. That's what a network address translation does. Basically, he's going to come and put his public IP, put his port that he assigned to you, and he's going to request it from Google at his port, which is port 80. When it comes back to port 4555 to him, he removes his IP address, he removes his port, he then replaces it with your IP and your XYZ port that you stated. Leaves intact the other side of the packet, he leaves it alone. Still there. Any questions? Next is QoS. Is there somebody that can explain to me, someone else that can actually explain to me QoS?
It divvies up the bandwidth for really important programs.
Okay, so when you mean by divvy up, how does it do it? You kind of get a little bit more into it, or if you can.
I don't exactly know how it does. I just know that if there's too much bandwidth being used, then your router or whatever can provide at the moment, you can set different parameters.
Exactly. You're hitting it right on the head. That's a key word that I wanted to hear. What happens basically is, let's say that at the moment nobody is talking, and you're downloading, I don't know how many gigs of information for a file that you want. But then somebody creates a Zoom meeting call. With QoS, without QoS, since you started downloading and you're still downloading this big file, everyone is basically sharing the exact same bandwidth, and most likely mine's going to be pulling harder than yours. So basically you have no guarantee that the actual service of the call is going to be good. So what happens is they created this feature called QoS. There is one for circuits, which is called MPLS, which uses a quality of service to be able to do this. So basically you guarantee to a specific protocol, whatever it is that you want, to be able to override. So as soon as that call comes in and it gets started, it'll push you, the person that's downloading, down because it's eating up too much bandwidth. So he'll actually push his speed down, push yours up to the guaranteed speed, whatever guaranteed speed is in that quality of service, and allow you to talk with that guaranteed speed amount. If you can get more, you get more, but it's no less than that. That's what's being guaranteed to you, no less than that threshold. If anybody else needs to talk, they can't. As long as it's the same, obviously, quality of service, then they're going to be hogging that area. Any questions? Okay. You guys sure?
It's kind of self-explanatory in a way.
Okay. All right. Everybody know what UPnP is?
Need a little more explanation. I've seen it, but I'm not exactly sure.
Well,
Generally, it just configures itself.
Yeah, exactly. The universal plug and play, it's basically automatically forwarding a port on your router, saving the hassle of actually writing the actual forwarding of ports. So obviously it's a little bit dangerous if you try to set it up too much on enabling some of these things and features. There is some security features that can be dangerous, but in essence, that's what it does, automatic forward of ports. Any questions, doubts? Firewall, that's actually port filtering, as we stated before, is used to open and close certain ports. So if you don't want stuff to be coming in, you can actually stop all the ports that you don't want to come in. It has port forwarding also capability, which obviously can forward any request that's coming in and forward it directly to that specific computer. So when anything comes in requesting to the router's IP from the public side to see port 80, automatically, if they're requesting to that router IP, port 80, it will go to that internal port IP. That make sense or no? Yes, no, maybe so. So
can you explain that again?
All right, so we have, not public IP. So we have the cloud here, right? So your router, when I said, has a public IP, right? That's the router, right? He's in the public. So now he is visible in the wild, wild west. And the only person that they can see in the wild, wild west, you could think of him as your attorney. He is your representative. He represents you always in the internet. Now, as he has, as any other attorney has, he has many clients. And so when he goes and he represents you out here, he sees that when it comes in and they say, hey, I want to talk to you on port 80, which is HTTP, we all know. What happens is that router, we all agree, it's not a web server, is it? Is a router a web server? No. No, right? So now that it came here and it's asking this guy here on port 80, that information with the firewall feature of port forwarding, he basically, if you have that entry in there, will go, okay, that entry tells me that that internal IP is 10.216.8.1, and obviously the port is 80. So whenever somebody in the internet is looking at my public IP and comes and asks me that they want to see my port 80, I just route it to Jordan, who actually is 10.216.8.1. Lack of another better number. Did that make sense?
A little bit.
Very similar to what NAT is doing. You remember what we did with NAT? But this is different because now in NAT, I initiated the call and I asked the router to bring me Google. And I'm asking him, and I gave him what port I started from, right? So then he puts that on a table and he says, okay, that's your port that you started talking on, and you want to talk to Google on 80, right? Now I'm Google router. I got your request. Thank you. Who is port 80 in my LAN? Oh, that's you. Google web server. Here you are. Internal IP address is 192.168.40.40. Here you are. That was this guy that's in the internet on IP 1.5.5.5, lack of a better number. And he's on port 4555, as I stated earlier. Make sense yet? So that firewall is the one that's able to decide, the feature inside that router is the one that's able to decide. Usually it's a separate appliance, but in this time, it's inside. It's included inside the actual router. Those are the all-in-one SOHO routers. This we talked about before is a complete separate appliance usually. Any questions? Okay, virtual private network. In essence, that's what it is. It's a connection, virtual connection that actually is across the internet and creates a virtual encapsulated tunnel. And you are able to do it with some of these actual routers. So I can actually create a tunnel that never goes down. Instead of having the actual application installed on my computer, the router will create the VPN tunnel from one end to the other end of the internet and always keep the tunnel up. That way, those two offices are connected without any of the users having to use any software. Any questions? Any doubts? Okay. Next slide, please. All right. Who can help me here with this slide?
Installation issues. Use documentation for the router. SSID and password for the router should be immediately changed so the network is not left vulnerable. Use a command prompt to ping a known address. Verify Ethernet cable is connected and has activity lights. Use command prompt IPconfig/all to verify settings. Verify TCP/IP settings through the local area connection properties box. Change to dynamic if static is assigned, or change to static and enter the IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. You want to always refer to the manual of the router, especially if you're not familiar with the actual router itself. And if there is doubts on any issues that you may be having, usually the documentation has little FAQs and or a resource of where you can go with that actual, if not go to Google, obviously to download it. As for the SID, I've stated it before and I'll state it again. Make sure you change your SIDs and your passwords to these routers. Password is on the internet. If I ever have doubts of what the default password is, I can simply just go into Linksys and ask Linksys, what is the default password? And
Default password?
with that ease, it is admin. The same thing, some of these providers will also give you a full list of all the different versions of their routers and all their default password, even the IP range that it is on.
Oh,
So,
this is animated. Randomized.
so be careful on whenever installing a router or an access point, depending on which mode that you're using it, that you leave these things as is. The same thing as I stated before on the Internet of Things. Change the default password or turn off the feature of the Internet of Things, of it being able to connect. You don't want to use it at that time. If it's the refrigerator or whatever it is, you gotta change the picture, especially the ring box, because God only knows how many people have been staring at people in their houses and or their backyards because they just leave these cameras with the default password. Any questions? Next slide. Yeah, go ahead.
Why don't we just like get like a password generator for each router?
Why doesn't the provider?
Yeah.
Well, just imagine if they have a generator, then again, I still have your password. If I create a generator that creates the password for your router, all I have to do is tell the provider who is my router, and for it to generate this password is going to give me the exact same password. You have to change the password because of security purposes. If they do want to do that, they're going to have a way that when you reset it to give you, like you're saying, to give you the password to generate that password, maybe based on the MAC address or something of the router, or maybe the serial number of the router based on something like that. Either which way, those that are savvy are going to wind up finding out what's the algorithm or what's the way that they're actually creating the password, and they got you. Because there's got to be a way in. The manufacturer must have a way into your router by default. Next slide here. Alexa.
Common connectivity issues include verified device manager recognizes adapter without errors. If errors occur, it could be the NIC driver. If adapter has no errors, open network and sharing center. A red X located between devices indicates a problem. Click X to start Windows network diagnostics and troubleshooting programs. A PIPA and linked local addresses assign something is wrong. Address conflicts, limited or local connectivity, intermittent connectivity.
Thank you. Any questions on this slide? I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory in reference to the issue itself and what to do. Everyone remember who IPIPA is? IPIPA? Not bad language. Really means
You random IP address if you can't connect to the DHCP.
how random is it? Is it really, really random, or is there a specific range?
There's a specific range that it has a private B class,
Okay, we know it's B
etc.
class, and we know it's private.
16C.
We know it's B class. We know it's private. So it was what?
169.
169 what?
254.
Okay, we're getting there. That 254. I want the full range. It's 169.254, and I would accept, as I said before, if I build the wall, I will accept X's. So if you want to put .x, fine. That means you're telling me the whole range from 0, 0 to 255, 255. I'll accept that, but we need to be fully aware that it is the range 169, 254 from 0, 0 all the way up to 255, 255. That's the full range. Any questions? Else? Cool. All right, next slide here. Who else wants to help out?
I'll read.
Thank you.
Common wireless user errors include Wi-Fi adapter turned off on computer, router placed in an area that has RF interference or using same channels as other broadcasting devices in the area. Router channels can be charged through the browser program, placed in a higher position for better access, entering the wrong key for access, SSID is not being broadcasted, device is too far from the router and signal is weak or lost.
Any questions on the wireless issue? I think we kind of mentioned those several times before. No? What also can actually interfere with the RF antenna in a SOHO environment, or even a regular office environment? We find these things, or in your house. I'll give you that much of a big clue. It's
Microwave.
That is correct. You'll be surprised how many times I've been called to locations that I have designed, and they're crying and complaining that for some weird reason at lunchtime or in the early morning, they have a lot of connectivity issues. And basically, if somebody's using the microwave, and then unfortunately, either the vendor or the technician that you sent out, instead of placing it all the way up, they went and put it maybe in the drop ceiling right above the microwave, or right next to the microwave, basically. So as soon as you use a microwave, it will interfere. Any of those type of strong magnets or anything like that that may be creating issues too. Any questions? Doubts? Next slide here. Anyone?
I'll read.
Okay.
Troubleshooting connectivity issues. Make sure it's your problem, not an issue with a specific website. Try to connect to multiple websites. Check for a valid IP address. IPconfig all. Check physical connections, power cycle, everything, and check another device. Check for problems with the network adapter. Open device manager. Check connectivity, ping localhost, ping default gateway router, ping a known website.
Mm-hmm. Now you can do those features here. Everybody know who is IPconfig all?
It's a command
It
line.
gives you the full NIC interface. In other words, the information.
Okay. Just of your NIC card only?
Well, other things too, like let's say you have an antivirus program and it has a interface where it will scan those packets. It will show you all your hardware related to addresses.
Mm-hmm. So here's an IPconfig. Here's my host name of the computer from MDC. That's the DNS suffix that I belong to. So it gives me everything, including that I have this here as my DNS suffix. You can see that my provider or my router has handed off the DNS suffix of where I'm coming to. Next, when I do all, it will give me all of my cards, be that it is a virtual appliance inside my computer or an actual card that's physically in here. So here you'll see my Ethernet card. I have my wireless LAN card here and my other wireless LAN adapter. Does it want to go down? No, it doesn't want to go down. There we are. Gives me the MAC address of each, and it'll give me the IP associated with each. If it is connected or not, obviously. This is disconnected, this is disconnected, so I got nothing. And then here, this one's connected. And that's my configuration. That helps me know, basically, if I'm able to get an IP address, especially if I'm on auto config. If it's on static IP, it's not going to help me much except to tell me exactly how I'm configured. The next step, as we saw here, we check the physical connections, make sure everything is okay. Maybe open up the device manager, and as I stated, go and check the actual device so that we could see that little red X or not. Last things here we have is capability of pinging. So I can actually see if I can ping Google, and that will be www.google.com. And he will, well, that's Google. I obviously the wrong name, but that name does exist. So you can see here, it'll respond. Now, what happens if it's not responding, if I'm having a lot of issues, but I can ping my router, but I can't ping certain locations. But actually, there is a thing that's called path ping. And so now I can actually ping along the path. And what he does is he sets the time to live. The time to live here, as you notice, was 53. That's how many hops or how many nodes I can go out before it's considered a dead packet. So when I go in here and I do path ping of the 172.217.8.68, I'll be able to see that every single hop, it'll check and give me statistics when it finishes. I'm gonna go and check every single hop, every node, every router that's out there. It's gonna get pinged by this. Basically, what all it's doing is doing a ping command, and at the end, it gives you a overall statistics of every hop by the time you get to Google. Any questions? Doubts? As we see here,
You
I
live
come
around
into-
Palmetto?
Who?
Do you live around Palmetto? In
No.
North Dade?
Yeah, North Dade, yeah. I live North Dade, yeah. I'm in North Dade, right? Here's the backbone when I come into to the actual main backbone of Comcast compared to the node here, which I'm getting to is most likely the one near my house, these nodes here, by the time I actually get out, which is in Pompano Beach. That's when I've North Dade, Pompano, Comcast.net. Then it hops to the next backbone of Comcast. I'm still not on the internet. Notice this. This is still inside Comcast network until it actually finishes getting out here. Then you can see me getting out to the other section on the other end. Questions, doubts? Now, the funny thing is, if you notice, who did I ping? Right? Who is really answering me? Is it google.com?
Doesn't look like google.com.
No, that is the one that represents google.com in your area. Remember, there's a farms or meshes of these servers out there. That would probably be the closest server of google.com to me. We stated that happens also in your actual computer. You may have cache that's accumulated. Not as in money, but the CACHE in your computer. A lot of people also have cookies, but not the ones that you can eat. So, who's a brave soul for today? Who's going to help us out? Number one. Justin.
Which of the following are changes that might need to be made on a SOHO router's initial configuration? I believe it is C, change the SSID.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh, you can choose more than one. Okay.
It says choose all. Yeah, it says choose all. So that right away I should know that it may be more than one. So that kind of hints.
I would also do A, change the router's password.
All right. Cool. Number two. Pablo.
All right. Which of the following four interconnection options, which typically offers the slowest connection speed?
Which is the oldest?
Satellite.
How fast did a satellite do? You remember?
I remember that it wasn't very reliable.
Correct. But did it have speed at all?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was like what, 50 something, I think it was? Megabits. I'm saying the wrong word. So cable, we said, was in the megabits or megabytes nowadays. So is DSL is in the megabits. Dial-up. What is the fastest I said in dial-up has?
Kilobits.
128K kilobits per second. I don't think there's really anything faster than that out there.
Slow.
So dial-up would be the slowest out of all these. Next one, Christina.
Hello? Okay. My mic wasn't working earlier. Which of the following wireless encryption technologies is the weakest?
Which one out of all of them was the weakest?
think it's B or C, but I can't remember.
Okay. Let's look at the names here. So we have WPA2, which is the second version of WPA. We have WEP, which is the wireless equivalent. God, I forgot what P stands for there for a second. And then you have WPA, which is the first version of WPA2. And then you have TTIP, which happens to be something that has to do with one of them. It's not really a choice. I'll give you that much of a hint. Anyone want to take a wild guess? It was the one that I complained about the most, at least with the weakest, because of its name. I think it was an insult. And that was wired equivalent, which is what?
It's WEP.
WEP, which is wired equivalent privacy, which is a lie. WEP.
There is none.
Hmm?
Huh?
What?
I was making a joke.
Oh, yeah,
Not much
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That was like an insult to injury. Here we go. Number 4.
Hey.
Hey, everyone agree what type of IP address should be configured on a printer so that it can always be located by the devices it serves? What type of IP should I put?
I agree.
Static, right? Be that it be private or be that it's public. That all depends on who I'm servicing. Bottom line, it should be static. Yes. Next one, number 5.
That's D.
What advantage does satellite have over cable for connecting to the internet? Everyone agree is D, the cable is limited to areas with cable installed while satellite is not. As long as I have a line of sight, I'm able to connect to the satellites. I'm not saying about performance-wise, because that would be actually not true. We're just saying what's the advantage of satellite. And I stated previously that my Uncle Bill, basically, he was in the boondocks and he was using satellite because there was nothing else available. Questions or doubts? All right, I'm going to be ending the session.